my name is Barbara Streppel, and I will talk about user-centered XR. Yes, perfect. So who am I and why am I here? So I'm a software engineering at MaibornWolff, but I studied mechanical engineering. I didn't want to study informatics or software engineering because it's so technical, so theoretical. I wanted always some physical stuff and the user in center of my studies. And so I made a study in mechanical engineering. And my master thesis was about interactions in VR. And I got for this the VDI prize in 2017. And the paper of this master thesis got the Best Paper Award this year in the Human Computer Interaction International in Las Vegas. So this shows that it's very important for the people see that interactions and usability in VR and AR is very important. But nobody does this. So when I go down to the Expo, I think our company is the only booth who has not technology and not software. So everybody knows usability is very important, but the people don't do it. It's very sad. I don't understand it. So I will show you a little bit how you can do user-centered design with XR, with the focus on the 7 dialogue principles. So just for repeat, this is the user-centered design cycle. So first, you have to specify context of use. You have to specify the requirements. Then you can prototyping, create design solutions, and in the end, of course, you have to test it. You have to evaluate it. So I will go through this cycle, and the main part will, as I said before, the 7 dialogue principles for VR. So first of all, in the beginning, you have to understand the user. This is important in every application you do. You will see in VR and in AR, it's most important to understand who is your user. Know your user, what is VR. Know your user, what he has to do, or is he a really newbie? And you have to understand your application, what is the task the user has to do. So, but this you are doing exactly like you did it before, like with personas or with an empathy map, but it's really important that you understand before you implement something, you understand your user and your application. So, when you implement it, don't do it the big stuff in the beginning. Just do a little bit of prototyping. We do it most of the time with low fidelity prototyping. So I have here 2 examples. This is for wearable AR. So you can see it. It's really easy. It works a little bit. So, but be creative how you can do this with your AR or VR apps. Just take your stuff you have on your desk and try to make some low fidelity prototyping and see if it makes sense what you imagine. Another possibility is this is the controller of the HTC Vive, just with a few stuff on it to see, okay, that looks great, I can implement this with a real software, but tested before. I think 2 or 3 slots before me, there were Philip. He was talking also about low fidelity prototyping. It was exactly what you have to do here. So also, what we did, we looked for some possibilities to do this low fidelity prototyping and have now this method catalog, for example. And of course, what you can do is scribble, like you did always before, I hope, with web or some mobile applications. Just do it like you always did and be a little bit creative how to do it in 3D. After this, you have, of course, to evaluate it. You have to test it. Also here, the slot of Philip 3 times before me, it was really great. It was only about this testing. Just do it like you always did. You can ask the expert, you can ask the users, you can make a guerrilla task, just look at the people, let them talk, make teach-back methods, or make video confrontation. The most of the application in VR you can mirror on the desktop, then you can see what they do. Just do it, because it's very important that you know what the user think about your application, and do it really often. You can do it with the prototypes, make some scribbles, ask the user, is this okay for you? Is this the way you would interact with your application, or isn't it? And testing is very important, and do it often. So to help the people by testing and by implementing, there are these 7 dialogue principles. I hope you all know them. They are very important in interaction and dialogue design. So for helping our engineers, we have some usability cards. They look like this. They have some examples here where they can look, okay, do I respect the dialogue principles or not? And what we do in research is to add to these usability cards to VR. So we added a new category, and we added new cards who put these dialogue principles into VR. And I will show you now what we find out, our key findings about what is very important if you use the 7 dialogue principles in VR. And we assumption that you can use them exactly like you did before in web application or in 2D applications. So why only VR, not AR? Just because we wanted to start in a small field and do it right. And when we find there something, we wanted to go to AR, but now only VR. And this is also the main question before you begin to implement something. You have to know, why are you using VR in your application? It's just because it's a cool feature, or is it because you have a pain and you want to solve a problem with VR? Because VR can do something the real world couldn't. So you could be really strong in VR, or really small, or really big, or you have the knowledge of everything. But this is also the problem. What should VR afford for you? So is VR a mapping of the real world? It could be in a training, for example. It should be like the real world, because you have to train something. But of course, it could be a place with new possibilities, where you are really strong, you're a giant, and you can look over the world and learn where the countries are, for example. So this is, you have to decide, for what is it? Is it the mapping of the real world, or is it a place with new possibilities? And also, you have to decide, is this a real mapping, or is it a place with a really high usability? Because the real world has a really bad usability. And attention, VR at the moment can only simulate 2 of 5 sensories. You only can hear something and you can see something, but use them. For example, in learning, this is the first of the 7 dialogue principles, suitability for learning. So support the users by making them an expert. Use all senses for them, give them explanations with hearing, so the person can see, like, for example, a robot, and the robot tells me something and shows me something, so I can learn it, because it's really important to learn all the stuff, because nobody knows everything about VR. We have no stuff everybody knows. So bring them so they can learn something. And they have the users should have the possibility to learn them in the beginning every time, because no user knows everything about your application, because every user thinks in another way. So you have to have a learning in the beginning, an introduction. But also give the possibility to cancel this introduction, because perhaps there's an expert who always used your application before, or knows really much about VR applications, and so he don't want your introduction, he wants just to play a little bit. Another point of individualization is that you have to consider that there are different sizes of people. If you have an application who has a desk with 1 meter 50 and the child wants to play it, or a person in a wheelchair, he can't use your application. So think about this. This for me is one of the most important dialogue principle. It is the suitability for the task. As I said before, it's very important to know what your application should afford. This is the dialogue principle for this. So be careful where you put your information, so the user has to know where the informations are. As a bad example, in my master thesis, the informations was always 1 meter before the user. It was bad because sometimes it was in a house and you don't see it anymore. So you need, this is some of error tolerance. You need some stuff so you can always see the important informations. And also, this is just my opinion for this real metaphors. So if you can throw away something in the trash, why only use a real trash? Don't use an icon. You are in VR. In real world, you wouldn't have an icon where you can put on and then a real object disappear. In the real world, you throw away things. But also here is this, do you have a real world mapping, or do you have a good usability? With good usability, and you want to hammer something, you would have hammers and nails. But in real world, in a garage, you have more than just a hammer and nails. So think about what is your task, and have a consistent environment where the user knows what he can do, but it is immersive, so it's really difficult. The next one is conformity with user expectation. Here also, if you have a good usability, you give the user the possibility to teleport. But on the other hand, you can't teleport in the real world, you can move. So try to make an application where it's normal for the user to teleport, because, I don't know, you are in the future, or you are in space, you are in Star Trek, I don't know. But think about it, so it's normal for the user to use your interaction. So the user expects it, because you create your environment that the user expects exactly what you do as an interaction. Also, a thing is, with good usability, you have buttons, because everybody knows button from 2D interface, but they doesn't fit in VR. In real world, you don't have buttons, so use 3D metaphors, like it said before with the trash. Also, if you have an environment like it is in the real world, you need gravity. When you throw something away, it's away, but that's bad, because perhaps the person needs this hammer. But if you don't want gravity, you have to create an environment where there is no gravity, and it's created so the user knows that there is no gravity. Also, really important is, if there is a hammer and there are nails, but there are more because you want to create a real environment and a logical environment. If I can grab the hammer and I can grab the nails, I want to grab exactly like I grabbed the hammer everything else in this room. So be careful. So the next point is self-descriptiveness. The good usability would be to highlight stuff you need. So highlight the hammer. But in the real world, you wouldn't highlight objects. That isn't possible. So also create an environment where the user expects that something is highlighted when he uses it. Make the user clear that this is not the real world. It is a world which is really immersive, but it isn't the real world. Here you can highlight something. The next and last point of these 7 dialogue principles is controllability. So the user can control his process. So good usability, everybody knows it from web applications or from desktop application, is I can always go one step backwards. I can undo things, but in the real world, you can't undo things. Like I said before, the real world has a really low usability. It's really bad. So what is your application for? Is it for learning? Then you have to learn that if you do something like throwing your hammer away, it's away. So you have to restart it. If you want to have a good application or you want to have a high usability in your application, then you have to have a system that it's possible to bring back the hammer. So this is the last point, but it's exactly what I said before. If you throw away a hammer, this is an error and it's game over for the application, then you have to bring something that the hammer came back to you. And so again, create your environment that the user expected, that it fits in your application. So perhaps I'm in space in the future and when I throw away things, they're magnetic and they comes back to me. For example, be creative. You have to be creative in VR. But we think the 7 dialogue principles are really good and they can map in VR, but they have to be a new one. We called it comfort, and the user should feel comfortable. So in a normal desktop application, there are ergonomics, how you sit, how you should sit, how you should see on your desktop. But it's another thing. In VR, it is the thing of the application to have a good comfort for the user. So take into account that your controllers has a physical size. So you can't do some small stuff because there are controllers between. Of course, avoid animated movement because nobody wants to be motion sick. And of course, I hope, of course, VR doesn't have the resolution of the real world. So only use text is really necessary because reading in VR, everybody who's tried it before, it's, oh, I don't like it. And avoid physical and mental effort. Of course, only if your application isn't for this. So if you made a tennis application, of course, it's physical effort. But if it's not, then don't do these interactions or made really complicated interaction concepts because it's really mental. It has a really mental effort. You don't want this. You want that your user have fun, that the user has tries this out in a long time and not only 5 minutes and they say, oh no, it's too complicated, go away. So, in the conclusion, the user-centered design also works in AR and VR, but it's more important than on the web or your desktop application that you know your user and you know what your application should afford. And stay consistent, create an environment so the user expect exactly what your interaction should be like. So don't put interaction you think that's good in a mapping of the real world, but that doesn't fit. Try to be consistent, then it's okay. Then the user expects exactly what you did. What we want to do in our company for our next steps in research is to make our usability cards also for AR, and we want to try out these prototypes in more projects. So this was it. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. That's been an amazing session as a wrap-up. And, well, has anyone got a question for her? So, no questions at all. Everything's clear. So, thank you again. And